Hi y'all, this is Regina. Welcome back to Regina's Crafting and More. For those of you who have never or have little experience doing these quilted, pre-quilted blocks and assembling them, one of the things you want to make sure of is that you trim away all your batting and your stabilizer. You want to make sure that when you start stitching these, you have a placement line in the block, you lay down your batting, you have to cut your batting back all the way to the line. And then when you're finished doing your block, you want to trim your stabilizer away. You don't want to have any bulk in your seam lines. Alright, so here is a block that I got in a hurry, and I didn't trim the batting out as I started, and I still have my stabilizer on the back. So I'm going to trim all this out, and I'm using these scissors. They're kind of a curved type scissor. It's for applique, and I'm just trimming this out to get the stabilizer out. I'm going to go all the way around, and I'm just pushing my applique scissors up against the line that was stitched up against this line right here, which would be like if it was a piece block, this would be the outside of your piecing, and this would be your seam. So we're just pretending this is a pieced block, and we're just taking this stabilizer out. Now, I've had someone tell me that they didn't use batting, that they used that Pellin SF101. I don't know how that would work out, because that's fairly stiff. Okay, so now I'm going to trim out the batting, because I did not do it as I was beginning my stitching. So we have to get that batting out of there. You don't want it in your seam line. And this is your seam allowance right here. So when you sew it together, you don't want this bulk. Alright, we're just taking all this out. And using applique scissors or something like that gets you right up against that seam line, just as if you were still beginning your process in the hoop, because it stitches the placement line down for you, and you lay your batting down, and then it stitches the batting down, and then you trim that batting away at the seam using your applique scissors, or whatever method you choose to use if you don't have applique scissors. But you need to make sure that you're trimming that batting down, and this just shows you how to do it if you forget. And sometimes, let's see, can I get any closer? Nope. Alright, so did I do it on this one too? Looks like I did it on this one too. I was in a hurry. Oh, this one I already trimmed the batting away, but now I'm going to trim this stabilizer away. Okay, so we're just getting the stabilizer off the project and out of the seam allowance. Just hold your stabilizer up. Just hold it straight up, and then you can get right up against your block. Okay, so there's the essay. So did I do it on these? So these I did properly. And this one I've already put together. Okay. Now I'm not putting sashing in between in between here. I'm going to put, I think I'm going to put sashing down here. And of course I'll have it at the top and at the bottom. So these rows, let me see if I can get this down here where you can see it. And I may end up stitching this S over again. Let's see, there's the S like that. Because I did it in white thinking that would work out, but I should have done an outline in blue to make that stand out. Alright, so there's all the blocks. Let's see if I can get this up higher. That's how I'm going to construct it, like that. Okay, and then I'll put my borders, red borders on, top and bottom, and then I'll put my outer border on, top and bottom. And then there's a little trick that I learned when I first started taking quilting lessons, and it's how to match up your seam lines. So when you have piece blocks, you've always got, you know, some sort of seam that you can use to line up your blocks. The same thing applies with these blocks. This is your seam line right there. That is your block line. Pretend this is the edge of your fabric. This is your 1/4 inch seam right here. So this is the edge of the block that you've made, whether it's a piece block or, in this case, a stitched block. Okay, so to put those together, what you can do, I don't know if I can do this on camera or not. I'm not going to let you look on the back of this. So you take a pin, take a straight pin, and put it at the intersection of your corners on one block. Poke it through. Make sure it's going right through the edge. Can you see that pin line? Okay, so it's right through the edge. Then you want to put that pin in the intersection on the other block that you're going to attach. Let me make sure I'm putting these the right way. And these are very directional because your lines for your waving stripes are have to be going in the same direction on these. Okay, so you want to make sure you're going the right way, and I'm going the wrong way. So let me get to the other corner. I'm going to take my pin and I'm going to put it in the corner. Okay, so it comes out the other end. You want to go in straight. And now, whoops, sorry, I got to go in this way. Put it in here. I'm used to doing this on the table. Okay, so I've got it going into the corner of my block. See, the corner. I've gone in from the back. I'm going to take that pin and I'm going to put it at the very edge, that edge of my other block where they meet up. I'm going to poke it all the way through till it's flat. Okay. Then I'm going to take another pin, sorry, and I'm going to put it in the opposite direction. Most people like to pin this way from the outside of the seam in, but I'm using a 1/4 inch foot, so it guides along here. You may be using something similar, but I've always found that if I take the pin and I go in this way, you want to poke it through and then push it up through the seam line. Okay, now you can take this out. And I actually just pushed that the wrong direction, so let me put it back in because I want to go this way. Alright, so we pin it, go in and come out in the seam allowance. Okay, so now we're going to do it at the other end of the block. We're going to poke it in through the back on the line. So all these blocks like this that have the decorative fill or the quilting already done and you're using batting, they all have a line around the edge, and that's going to be your guideline. All right, so I've poked it through. See how it's come through on the line? Hopefully you can see that. Now I'm going to take it and I'm going to poke it through the corner of the other block, just like I did at the top. Push it all the way through. And now I'm going to pin, go straight in, push it down, and go up into the seam allowance. All right, so I'm going to do one more right in the center. And this one's a little trickier. All right, so you have to look. So I've got it, hopefully you can see that I've got it through that edge, and I've put it through the edge on the other side, and I'm pushed it through. Sorry again for getting in front of you. And I'm going to take my pin, I'm going to put it straight through, and then come up in the seam allowance. And then I can take that aligning pin out. So now that's what I have, and those are lined up. So now you want to stitch right on that stitch line, directly on top of that stitch line. All right, so I've changed to my open toe foot because it has a line right in the center, and because we want our needle to go directly on this stitch line, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to put my needle down, okay? And I sew very slowly. And yep, I sew over pins. Okay, so I am stitching directly on that seam line. I don't go fast. Some people can just zip right through it. I do usually sew a little bit faster than this. And I can't use my foot control yet. It just can't get my knee to cooperate. Okay, so I'm going to sew off. Oops. All right, so now I'm going to take out my pins. And because I don't have any batting or stabilizer in there, I can look here. I've sewn directly on that stitch line. I open up my seam, okay, and yeah, this one shows a little bit through. This one didn't show hardly any. So did I have this on? I had that on a basting stitch. So let me take this out and pin it laying flat instead of trying to hold it. Okay, so I'm putting it on the edge of, you could put it on the edge of your table or the edge of your sewing machine. I'm sitting at my sewing machine. I'm going to do the same thing. I've put it right through the corner. I'm going to go right through the corner here and put my pin straight down, and I come back with another pin. I go in and come out in the seam allowance. So now I'm going to do it at this end. Go right into the corner with your pin straight up and down vertically. Should have done that to begin with. Okay, so now I'm going to go in, come out in the seam allowance, take that out. So I'm going to go in through the stitch line, and I'm going to put it directly into the stitch line on the bottom, straight up and down. Oops, I just realized I have a basting stitch on this, and I don't know why I did that. Okay, so now I've got it pinned in 3 places. So I'm working with the 6x6 blocks. All right, so let's try this again. So I've got I've lined up my line on the center of my foot, putting my needle down, kind of doing twice, and I am following the stitch line on my block. So that stitch line is the edge of my my constructed block, if it were a constructed block. I have to go back and sew that other line because I did a basting stitch on that other seam. Alright, so that works. Alright, so there is my block sewn together. I'm going to take it and open up my seams, and you can see the stitch line barely in my seam. Okay, so there's that. Now I have to sew over this because I used a basting stitch on this. So even though you've used batting in this block, when you construct the whole thing, you sew it all together, you're going to put batting behind the whole top part. This is your pieced block, if you want to think of it that way. These are your pieced blocks. Even though you have that batting in there, you've got a lot of stitching that's compressing that batting. And we're going to use a whole piece of batting behind your project, and then put your backing behind that batting. And then you're going to stitch in the ditch if you want. You don't have to. Stitch in the ditch. It's very simple. You know, it's a matter of just, you've got your guide and just follow it and stitch in the ditch. And you're ready to go. I would press these seams open with steam. Okay, make sure you're pressing them open, so before you put your batting on the whole project, everything is pressed down good. And that's how you put your blocks together. All right, thanks for watching. Okay, so now I am adding my sashing, I hope to the bottom. Yes, to the bottom of my assembled row. I have my 3 blocks that I've sewn together, and I've cut my sashing, pinned it the same way, and I'm stitching right on the stitch line to sew my sashing on. And one thing that I've noticed as I'm doing this is that my foot that I'm using the center line on my foot. I know that you probably can't see it. Grab this. So I have, this is my end foot. I have a baby like Solaris, and I have a center line right here. So I'm sewing on my center line, and the outside of my foot is right along the edge. So I've got 2 methods of being able to stitch this and keep it aligned. Alright, I'm going to sew right off, and I'm going to, I've used the same pinning method that we did before. I just put everything, lined everything up and pinned. Instead of pinning this way, I pinned this way, and I don't have those heads of the pins in my way. It's just easier for me. You use whatever method you want. Alright, so I put my pretty sides down on my sashing, and there we go. So now I will assemble the other 3 blocks, one at a time, this one to this one, and then I'll send this one to this one. And then I'll put those on this sashing, and I'll have 2 rows. Alright, so I have my second row blocks. I've trimmed my seam line to 1/4 of an inch outside the stitching line, which if you were doing regular quilt blocks, this would be your pieced block line right here. And where's my pointer? So this in here from the seam line would be your pieced block, and this would be your 1/4 inch seam. So I've done that with all 3 blocks, and this is how they're going to go together. So I'm going to assemble these just like we did before. We put them together, and where are my pins? There's my pins. Put them together. We take our pin, put it in the corner, the very corner. Make sure you're in the very corner, and then take that pin and put it through the very corner of your first block. So we're attaching our second block to our first block. Okay, I go straight down, and then usually I put it on the end of the table, which you're not going to see. So there we go. I put it on the end of the table, and I put my pin straight. I take and I put another pin into the seam line. Then I take this pin out. I put it on the corner. Yes, it's a process. It's not a fast process. So we want it right in the corner of that intersection where your stitch line is. And then we put it right in the intersection on the other block. Put it through, keep it straight, take another pin. All right, I just threw it on the floor. And then I go in and come out in the seam line to hold those blocks together. Then I do the same thing in the center. I go through the stitch line and hold my pin straight, go through the stitch line on the other block, put my pin down, put a pin in, and come out in the seam allowance. Okay, well, I didn't go through this one, so I got to do it again. I hate doing it afterwards. Okay, so we go through that intersection on the stitch line, through the intersection on the other block, and this time we're going to make sure we go through both blocks. Okay, go through there, and come up in the seam line. Okay, so now I've got these blocks together. You don't pin this one until after you've sewn this one. So let me go sew it. All right, I've sewn right on top of the stitch line. Okay, when I open it up, there it is. So now I'm not going to worry about pressing right now. We're going to attach this one. Okay, so lay them out, fold it over, and do the same thing to line this one. All right, I've pinned my A block to the S block, and I've got a stray thread, and I'm going to go sew it together. All right, so I'm at my pressing table. I know this is a little dark. Let me see if I can't get some more light. That might have helped a little bit. All right, so now that my blocks are sewn together, I use my finger and kind of open these seams, press them down. Your batting has really been compressed because of all the stitching, so you don't have to worry. You don't have any batting in your seam line. And I think I have steam in this iron. So now I'm going to take and I'm going to steam my seams open. Okay, so I've got one seam steamed open. I'm going to make sure I've got this seam finger pressed, and I'm going to go right along the middle of that seam and steam that down. All right, so now my seams are steamed down. I've got nice flat seams. There we go. Nice flat seams. All right, so now I've pressed my little sashing over. And like I said, if you want to put sashing in between these blocks and sew the sashing to this block and sew this block to the sashing, so sashing to this block, and then sew this block to the sashing, you could do that. So I'm not doing that. I'm just going to attach this to my inner sashing, inside sashing. So just fold it over and then pin it just like before and sew it together. All right, I have my second row pinned to my sashing. So if I open it up, there it was upside down, that you're going to have your sashing in there like that. So I'm going to go sew my second row to my sashing, and I'll be back. So before I sew it, I'm going to tell you, make sure that your sashing and your seam line meet up here at the top. If they don't, readjust, and you can readjust as you're sewing too. I just like to have that pin in there to secure. So I've got to add another pin here. So I don't have to do too much readjusting at the machine. All right, so just make sure that your seam allowance, we're having storms and the electricity keeps flashing, meets up. All right, so I've sewn these blocks to my sashing. I have my seams going towards the sashing on both the top and the bottom, and golly, we're getting a lot of electrical flashing. And so now I have 2 rows sewn together. So I'm going to cut another piece of sashing. Just FYI, I cut this 1.5 inches and sewn it. I've allowed for a 1/4 inch on this side and a 1/4 inch on this side on my sashing. So I'm going to add another piece of sashing, and one length will do 2 rows. So I'll have to cut another length or 2 to go all the way around. So I'll have an inner border. All right, so that's how you do it. You're just going to keep doing that. You'll assemble your last row. Okay, and then you're going to add this fabric along here. That's going to be your inside border, and then you're going to add your outside border to that. Now, if you want, you could add, you could stitch this, add this border, and then add a piece here, not having this on, okay? So then you could stitch these 3, add the outside border, and then stitch here and here, and then stitch this row to here, and then you would have your outside border on your rows if you want to assemble it that way. I prefer having a solid piece along the side instead of other pieces, okay? So I'm just going to put in my sashing, and then I'll add my outside borders. And that's the process. And then you're going to put your batting underneath everything, and then you're going to stitch in the ditch. I do that to hold my blocks down secure. Okay, so I stitch in the seam line all here, and then I kind of tie it off and let it jump, and then tack down and tie it off, let it jump, and then I trim that jump. And that holds these blocks down to your back batting. And trust me, my spring, I did my welcome spring door hanging the exact same way, and it turned out beautifully. All right, thanks for watching. I hope this helps.